Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the CannaList Conversations. My name is Patrick Doherty and we are here today with Louis Marchand, who is the president and CEO of Flora Growth Corp, which is a NASDAQ traded company. Louis, how are you?
I'm good, Patrick. Thank you for having me.
And where are you?
I'm actually in Miami, Florida, where our U.S. headquarters are based out of.
Okay, I can see the palm trees behind you, so.
Yeah, yeah. We
nice
moved from New York and Toronto. It's much nicer than up there for sure.
Yeah, it's a little bit warmer, right?
Yes.
But despite being in Miami, you're going to talk to us a little bit about what's going on in Colombia. Is that correct?
Yeah, look, Flora Growth is a global cannabis company. We have our base of operations in South America out of Colombia, which is where we have our extraction facility, our cultivation farm, and there's significant cannabis reform that is coming into place. So big news coming out of that part of the world.
And the big news is that the government has mandated that insurance companies need to cover medicinal cannabis. So what is the implications of that?
Oh, they're significant for a while. And the spirit of the law that was put in place in 2016 and has been reformed several times since then in Colombia was to ensure that patients would have access to safe and secure cannabinoid pharmaceutical formulations. And now this change will allow coverage for all of those members that have insurance coverage in Colombia, which is the majority of the Colombian population. So patients will now have the opportunity to go to a doctor's office and be prescribed for their specific ailments, safe cannabis formulations, and have access to them in the legal market.
And Flora has launched a new division last year, I believe it was, for Flora forma, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, Patrick. And we understand that our company is founded on three foundational priorities. The first one is the cultivation of one of the lowest organic flowers in the world. And we have achieved just that at 6 cents per gram of dry flower. The second one is a portfolio of brands and products that are being distributed globally today. And the third one is pharmaceutical solutions that have safe access of high quality to patients. Flora Pharma is aimed at that third specific priority. We're ensuring that we provide scientific-based research, that we create formulations, and that those formulations get access to the public. In fact, just as early as today, we announced the filing of a patented formula that will support the treatment of many ailments.
And to support sort of the evidence-based research that we need in order to allow us to prescribe, what kind of clinical trials are you working on?
Well, there's several shorter path ways to ensure that you provide enough medical trials. Some of them are phased medical trials, like the ones that are traditionally known. All of them are, depending on the science of the formulation. If you're working on immune modulating formulas, you can have non-phased trials, which is some of the formulations that we're working on. A number of those are being worked on today. Some of them in the United Kingdom. We launched a clinical trial in the United Kingdom last year, which is going through the ethics committee clearance at the NHS. We're also once again filed a patented formula for the specific treatment of COVID-19 SARS virus, and we'll expect to launch clinical trials with the Colombian FDA called in vivo.
And what are some of the other disease areas that you're focusing on?
Well, fibromyalgia, and clearly there's a lot of empirical data that shows that cannabinoids treat a number of ailments, such as anxiety, depression, pain, and insomnia. Our interest as of today is in the areas of obviously COVID-19, because we believe in medical research, and the science is telling us that this virus will become endemic and will become something that humanity is going to have to deal with for the long term. And then second is fibromyalgia, which is pain, and obviously there's many factors that are contributing to fibromyalgia being a significant ailment in humanity. And those two are a priority for us today, as we know we can reach safe formulations in a shorter amount of time that can be available for consumers and patients.
And with the new mandate, does that mean that the insurance companies are more likely to support and fund these trials?
Yeah, they're not only more likely, I think it's important now that doctors are able to prescribe these formulations. They have been wanting to prescribe formulations with cannabinoids for a significant amount of time, but they're not able to do so because patients in Colombia need support in getting their medicines paid for. And now that the insurance is covering them, they're going to be able to do so. So part of what Flora Pharma's vision is also to educate the medical community. We're developing education modules for doctors, for nurses, so they understand the science behind cannabinoids, so they can understand how they can impact their patients' lives. And that is something that we are launching, and we plan to consistently support over the long term.
And one of the sort of key structures of reimbursement is value-based care. So this idea of better outcomes, greater efficiencies, and reduced costs. So how does cannabis stack up to opioids and other types of medications when you look at value-based care?
Well, Patrick, I think that this has been a conversation that is as old as the cannabis industry, and it's the fact that opioids are probably one of the biggest epidemics worldwide today. The addictive nature of opioids and the many deaths that are being experienced in the United States, but globally alone is significant. The addiction rate and the possibility of cannabinoids replacing opioids as a safer alternative to the treatment of many ailments, including pain, of course, which is a major one for opioids. It really presents a tremendous amount of potential. And not only the benefits come in terms of effective care, but also in the reduction of addiction rates, which I think is incredibly important for this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, because that means that, you know, there's less likelihood of overdoses, which result in some kind of need for acute care, which is generally expensive, right?
That's correct.
And so why did Colombia move towards this mandate? What drove that?
You know, this all moves, Patrick, from the inception of the law. And like the spirit of the law, as I mentioned at the beginning of our interview, was to ensure that patients received access to proper medical care, to proper medications to treat their ailments. And cannabinoids are a safe and effective way to treat many of these ailments. But the law itself did not allow for doctors to be comfortable prescribing medications. In fact, it was incredibly difficult for patients to have access to any sort of cannabinoid formulations in Colombia. So even though the law legalized the cultivation and legalized the extraction and transformation of dry flower into APIs, into pharmaceutical formulations, the end consumer, the patient, did not have access. And the only way they could have access if there was a modification in the law where the insurance companies covered those sorts of formulations. And now that they are, patients will be able to start having access to these types of medications, which once again was the initial and most important principle that founded the law.
And how is the medical community responding to this? I mean, a lot of times the medical community is still old school, and they don't necessarily recognize, you know, cannabis as, you know, a possible solution. So how are they receiving this?
I mean, the results are mixed. Patrick, obviously, you're absolutely right. And in Colombia, there continues to be a stigma with regards to cannabis because of the past that Colombia had in terms of the drug war. It takes a lot. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of education. There's members of the scientific community, members of the medical community that understand the absolute benefits of cannabinoids. And as scientific-based research continues to come out, and we continue to inform the medical community and educate the medical community and communicate stories like the one of our chief scientific officer, Dr. Annabelle Manalo, where she utilized a cannabinoid-based formula to cure her child, and many other stories that treat epilepsy, that treat pain, that treat insomnia, continue to become more scientific-based, receive that support. The scientific community and the medical community will respond. So we believe that the rate of adoption of cannabis formulations from the medical community will grow exponentially over the upcoming months and years.
And what is the process in Colombia? Do patients get a prescription and then go to the drugstore, or do they go to a dispensary? How does that work there?
Yeah, so a part of the change in the law, and the reason why it was so difficult, not only that the prescription was not covered by the insurance companies, that's something that we just solved for, but also if the prescription had been covered by the insurance companies, there weren't many places where a patient could take that prescription and get the formulation.
Mm-hmm.
There was a recent change in the law that allows pharmacies to carry cannabis formulations, and now the consumer will be able to go to pharmacies in their local pharmacy and have the formulation available to them. So that's a change in the law that just happened over the last few months that will complete the entire chain. So not only doctors will be able to prescribe, patients will be able to go to a safe place to get the formulation.
And is it readily available in most pharmacies, or still specialized?
Not yet. It's still specialized.
Mm-hmm.
It is still specialized, and up until a few months ago, the access was incredibly small. But because of the changes in the law, the specialized pharmacies will become more the general pharmacies that you and I know and see, such as CVS or Walgreens in the US. Those types of pharmacies like Pharmatolo and other pharmacies in Colombia will be able to get the license to carry these types of formulations and prescribe them to patients or give them to patients.
And what, if any, is the perceived impact on the illicit market by making this available?
Well, I think there's going to be a deterioration. The black market is a meaningful one in Colombia. They're calling it the natural store market. They're not dispensaries. They're like natural stores. The problem with these types of places and distributions, which are very popular, where the majority of the cannabis revenue is today, is that the point of origin of those formulations is not clear. We don't have a good understanding whether the formulations are accurate, whether the grow practices are accurate, whether there's an impact on, say, heavy metals or other microorganisms. They're not safe for consumers or patients. And now but the patients are going there because it's the only point of access that they have. But now that the laws are changing, patients and consumers are going to have a safer pathway to treat their ailments with cannabinoid formulations. So the impact will be significant.
And how is the government supporting this? Because one of the challenges that we see in the US is that, they're allowing these medical applications, but then they're taxing them at a 30% rate. So, people are still going back to the illicit market because it's still cheaper, and you're right, they don't know what they're getting, and we don't know the consistency, but, if you can go to the illicit market and get something much cheaper, you're likely going to do that. So in Colombia, how is the taxing situation on product, and how does that impact the market?
Yeah, clearly. I mean, taxing in Colombia, I think we could have an entire hour to discuss the tax laws everywhere, in Colombia. However, However, I will say, Patrick, that this move specifically, the move from the government to have insurance companies cover the formulations, protects patients against that, because now the insurance companies will be responsible for that burden, which means that patients will have more access without having to ante up a significant amount of money. So that's a meaningful change. I would say, in terms of the Colombian government, the changes that have happened over the last 12 months, which Flora Growth has been a big part in advising the Colombian government, which is very, very friendly and pro-cannabis, have put Colombia at the forefront of cannabis reform. Not only in the country, you're now able to grow cannabis, both psychoactive and non-psychoactive. You're also able to transform it. You're now able to manufacture very, very soon, in the upcoming weeks, food and beverage products. You have now access and coverage to a medical network and insurance companies. So I think the government has done all the things they need to do. We would have liked for them to do it sooner, obviously, but now it's happening. And I think the benefits of the changes that have been put in place will be reaped for the years to come.
And was this, an economic development driven, change? So did they see an opportunity, and what motivated them to change?
I think the motivation for it's various motivations. Last year, the change in export of dry flower was an economical one. It like the over 50% of the cannabis trade globally is dry flower. If Colombia does not enter the dry flower market, they're cutting over half of the market size available for revenue growth, for tax revenues, as well as employment. So that's very important, especially since agriculture will continue to be the engine of growth of the country of Colombia. But the medical change was not an economic driven one. It was a medical one. The government understands, and the Ministry of Health understands that patients need access to safe medications, and that cannabinoids provide a pathway to cure many ailments, including pain, anxiety, insomnia. We're getting, of course, the treatment for COVID, many other ailments, and this step was a move to protect patients, was a move to protect the constituency of Colombia.
And hopefully one of the benefits will be that as you've moved the payment to the insurance providers, they are big enough and powerful enough to, push tax reform and make the overall product more available to the general populace.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Patrick. Not only from a tax perspective, but also from a research perspective. Like insurance companies and the government are now very interested in the work that has been resting on private company shoulders with regards to scientific-based research. So we're working with institutions, we're working with the government to ensure that we continue to invest dollars in research and develop formulations that will benefit the patients. And hopefully those formulations will be cost effective and will improve the quality of life of patients, which will reduce overall healthcare costs over the long term.
And obviously Colombia has medicinal use. Do they have adult use as well? Recreational use?
It's not legal as of yet. No, okay. Recreational use is not legal in Colombia.
Is there a movement towards that, or it's not on the table right now?
I think that's 2, 3.
You don't want to answer that
away.
question.
No, look, there was a law in Congress that was struck down last year. Clearly, we believe that cannabis, recreational cannabis for adult use in a safe and access way, will eventually be legal globally, but I don't see that in the sights of the Colombian government over the short term.
And one of the things we're here in Europe, and one of the things that we've been saying is Germany has medicinal use, is moving towards adult use, and we believe that it's sort of the dominoes start to fall. Once Germany, which is a relatively large market, has adult use, then we're pretty sure that the neighboring countries will follow suit relatively quickly. How does Colombia's lead on reimbursement from the insurance providers, how does that affect other countries?
Well, the treaty agreements on neighboring countries is very similar in terms of what you mentioned with Germany, but on a far smaller scale, right? Mm-hmm. Germany is the 4th largest economy in the world. They clearly have a lot of clout in the European Union, and as they go, will likely go the neighboring countries. Colombia has a similar influence in a smaller sphere in South America. So the neighboring countries, the countries that are part of treaties like the TLC, will likely evaluate whether or not this is the right path for them. So we certainly expect to have some meaningful change in South America, which likely will continue to impact the rest of the world.
And how, as a global company, how are you looking at different regions, and what are your interests in the US and North America versus Europe? Where are you focused, and what are you pursuing?
Well, almost 50%, Patrick, of the revenues of the cannabis trade come out of the United States. So the United States will always, I think, for any global company, need to be a point of attention. Clearly, any changes in the regulatory environment and legal environment with regards to cannabis in the US will impact the entire world. will be the biggest catalyst of impact in the entire world. So we're hoping that the Safe Banking Act, which is already in place in another law, comes through in March. The MORE Act and overall broadly federal legalization will be the biggest catalyst. We also are waiting for the FDA to rule on the safety of CBD on food and beverage products, which would be another significant catalyst and another cycle for CBD. So that would be number one. It's a long answer, but it's the number one priority. And in terms of the global environment in Central America, Mexico is number one for us. In South America, obviously Colombia and Brazil are number one. In the European Union, Germany, we're going to continue to evaluate the focus there. And then in APAC, we're looking at Australia. It's an incredible market, not only for entry, but also for distribution to other areas of Asia.
Mm. And then, one of the events, Colombia is a little late to the game, right? But they have a great environment for growing and stuff like that. So why is Colombia, so important at this stage?
Yeah, a little late to the game, but now at the forefront from a legal and regulatory environment. Right, and I think that's important, that even though the government was slow, now it's moving and making really great progress to give access to these products to patients. But you're absolutely right. The Colombian geography is perfect for the growth of the cannabis flower. When you think about flowers, Colombia is the number one producer of flowers in the world. Is the number two exporter of flowers in the world. It's the number one producer of specialty cut flowers. And the cannabis plant is a flower in itself. So the geography, the know-how, the agricultural know-how, the soil, the geographical conditions, the wind, all of them lend themselves for the cultivation of the cannabis flower at a very high quality, but at one of the lowest production costs in the world. And as the world globalizes and barriers of entry come down, the cannabis trade will commoditize. And those regions of the world that can grow cannabis with high quality and lower cost are going to be the ones that are going to win. And that's why Colombia is such a precious location to have a cannabis operation.
And what is the, are there social equity opportunities? Like, are there small growers, or is this a corporate grow environment? What does Colombia look like around that?
It's a mix of that. Clearly, there's a handful of big players. Flora Growth being the largest company by market cap in the Colombian environment.
I didn't mean anything bad about big players. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. But there's over 7,000 licenses. So there's small growers in Colombia. Not all of them, of course, are being utilized today. But there's over 7,000 licenses. I speak to small growers on a quarterly basis, support them with know-how, support them with information. Our intention as a market leader in the country is to ensure that these small growers can have the tools and the resources to grow quality cannabis, and that they are able to distribute it and get it to the end consumer. So clearly, there's a lot of opportunities for social equity. I think it's going to be a work not only from big companies such as Flora Growth, but also from the government to ensure that these small producers and growers continue to thrive.
And I know that you guys are focused on the medicinal side. Is there a focus on industrial applications for hemp as well?
Yes, clearly, I mentioned at the beginning of the call, Patrick, that we have three foundational priorities. The wholesale priority, the pharmaceutical priority, and then our consumer packaged goods. And in consumer packaged goods, obviously, there's a number of products that you can develop and give to the end consumer. From the wholesale side of things, there's many uses for the cannabis plant. When you submit the plant to extraction, you're only utilizing 20 to 40% of the plant. The other 60% of the plant goes to waste. And right now it's mostly being used as compost, right? But there's other uses for cannabis that are incredibly interesting, such as paper, cardboard, construction material, bioplastics, as well as textile fiber. All of these uses are being explored today. In fact, in our company, we have a project called Hemp Textiles, where we are manufacturing and selling hemp-made clothing and distributing already. This to say that there's many industries in which cannabis will create a disruption. It's just going to take some time to get the engines going.
Yeah, I mean, we see lots of sustainable opportunities, right? I mean, the plant itself, can, reconstitute soil and take out heavy metals and things like that. So, there's lots of opportunities from that perspective, as you said, clothing, paper, other things that are traditionally, not sustainable in their, life cycle can be replaced by a plant that is. So we're generally excited about that. It's not the immediate priority. Most folks are focused on medicinal, but there is a lot of potential and stuff like that.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And so again, just you're currently in the U.S. What are you focused on in the U.S.?
Well, clearly, consumer packaged goods is our number one priority here, because of access, and I think that has been our strategy from early on. Depending on the barriers of entry for each one of the geographies where we operate, we enter with the types of products that we have available, and that's what's so attractive from a company like ours, where we can pull different levers. In the US, we completed the acquisition of Vessel, which is a delivery method. The company basically they develop and distribute vaping devices, and we believe that over the long term, cannabis users that are going to or new adopters are going to look for more sophisticated ways of using their product. And Vessel designs absolutely beautiful products. They focus on design, they focus on experience. They're based out of California, and they have a very strong connection with MSOs and LPs. That company is a great company for us to expand our US distribution. But we're also entering the market and have entered the market with our clothing line. We launched our clothing line at Macy's over the fourth quarter. We have our topicals and skincare products being distributed in 45 out of the 50 states. We will likely explore the entry into the edibles market over the next 2 to 3 months.
Okay. And I know that you guys are doing research and clinical trials and doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing. Obviously, there's many players in the market that are taking advantage of loopholes and are questionable in what they're doing, questionable about the claims that they're making that their products can do. How does the industry deal with that?
You have to work with transparency. One of Flora Growth's priorities from day one has been transparency in everything that we do. That's the reason why we chose to go public through a direct IPO listing, which is probably the hardest path that you can select to become public. But it just meant that you had to clear a number of hurdles to get there. So that showed that to the investor community as a whole that we're willing to do what it takes to be transparent and be responsible with the capital that they're trusting us with. When it comes to end consumer, you have to have the same level of discipline. You have to have the appropriate certificates of analysis, the appropriate quality standards, and communicate and build that reputation over time. And when you make a mistake, acknowledge the mistake and be upfront about it and gain the trust of the end consumer. I think the industry will have to behave that way. Will have to behave in a more traditional company type of environment. As you probably know, Patrick, the early adopters of the cannabis industry were Mavericks, were probably in the illicit market before they joined the cannabis industry. This industry is now moving into a more professional, structured, quality-driven, fundamental-driven type of business environment.
Yeah, but even saying that, we've seen a lot of the big players run into problems and run into challenges because they either overpromised or or underdelivered, or just their management wasn't there. Like I said, we've seen a lot of big players, publicly traded companies that are having problems, and then the investors are fickle when it comes to cannabis. So is this sort of a long game when it comes to the investors and the industry itself?
Absolutely. I mean, the potential of cannabis, Patrick, I think you and I can agree that is massive. I mean, we're still in the early stages of what the global cannabis trade will look like. The regulatory environment is still not friendly. Cannabis is still not legal in the United States federally. So there's still a lot of hurdles that need to be cleared in order to understand what the true potential of cannabis could be. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done to understand the medical faculties and the formulations that can be developed from cannabinoids. And there's still a lot of work to do in terms of educating the end consumer, the patients, to ensure that the rate of adoption, that people utilize this product safely. But without a doubt, there's a massive amount of potential with cannabis. Over the short term, what cannabis companies need to do, what Flora is doing, is ensuring that we execute and that we start delivering on the fundamentals of a business, the fundamentals of leadership, focusing on people first, focusing on building a great infrastructure and developing what will be the foundation for a global market leader.
And how do you or how do you work with other players to, look towards standards and look towards, regulatory laws and things like that to, help booster this industry for the long run?
Yeah, we take it geography by geography. In Colombia, for example, we belong to a number of associations where we meet with market leaders regularly and we communicate the challenges that we have. We take those information that sorry about that. Is that you or me?
I think it's you. I think it's your video.
Okay.
You're back. Okay.
Okay. I do apologize, but we meet with market leaders. We certainly meet on a consistent basis and align what the priorities should be and what we should communicate to the appropriate leaders from a governmental standpoint, so they can effect change in the regulatory environment, in the legal environment, to make cannabis safer for the end consumers and the patients. That's our number one priority, to ensure that we get great quality products, safe formulations, inform the consumers, inform the patients, so they can have access to what is a life-changing plant.
And you also mentioned earlier that you are conducting or building educational components for the medical community. What does that look like?
We are. So we're working with there's great companies in the education space that have done this for a number of decades. They developed training courses. They have a proven method of education delivery and the distribution of the information. And we're working with those companies to develop an education platform and modules, and that will be distributed to health networks, to doctors, to universities. There's a number of colleges right now that are actually having like careers in cannabis. That's how meaningful this is becoming. And the companies that are doing it need to support the building of that infrastructure, that educational infrastructure. So we're doing that with these educational platforms and delivering them at the point where they're needed the most.
And do you think that the cannabis persona is misclassified? I mean, when we think of cannabis, we think of the stoner, right? But that's not who you're dealing with, I would assume.
Well, maybe 60 years ago it was. Maybe 60 years ago it was, but not today. I mean, I think we see when you look at it from an end consumer perspective or from a patient perspective, you see patients that have been dealing with chronic illnesses for a long time, that are looking for a solution that is safe, that is not addictive, an alternative to opioids. And there are normal, high-performing family members, mothers and fathers, people that students that just want to have a better quality of life. You also have the recreational adult use user that wants to have an alternative to alcohol, that doesn't want to wake up the following day after going out with a tremendous hangover and not be able to think or speak, and they're looking for other alternatives. And so the stigma is changing, and the persona is evolving. It's very different from the traditional stoner that you would have maybe 60 years ago. And for that reason, the products and the methods of delivery and the way the cannabis is consumed is so diverse, because of those end consumers are very different than the one consumer that we had perhaps half a century ago.
So we're early in 2022. What's your primary focus for 2022?
Well, 2021 was a foundational year for us. Obviously, Patrick, we went public on NASDAQ under the ticker FLGC on May 11th, the first plant-touching company to do so in the second largest exchange in the world. We completed a second financing. We acquired a number of companies and made some strategic investments from a CapEx perspective to ensure we had the distribution network ready. 2022 is a year of focusing on executing on fundamentals. We want to deliver meaningful revenues to ensure that our investors see that the potential of Flora growth is being realized. We want to finalize some various blocks of scientific-based research to ensure that we provide confidence in the medical community as well as our patients. We want to ensure that we complete education modules and distribute those broadly to ensure that the consumers and patients are comfortable and are educated about cannabis. And overall, we want to continue to expand our footprint as a global cannabis company.
And if people are interested in learning more about Flora growth, where would they go?
www.floragrowth.com. That's our website. Of course, we have various handles on Twitter. They can follow me on LinkedIn under Luis Merchan. Flora Growth is on LinkedIn as well. We are very active on those platforms. And of course, as our priority is transparency, we will continue to inform our investors and our patients and consumers through our various press releases.
Luis, we very much appreciate your time today. We look forward to some really exciting things. Congratulations on your upcoming anniversary, right? So your May is your anniversary for going public. That's exciting. We look forward to great things. We hope you'll come back and tell us more and tell us all the great things that are going on. Again, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Patrick. It's a pleasure. Okay, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.